Welcome to Trial of the Hollywood Sex Therapist Killer, the harrowing and tragic story of Dr. Amie Harwick, who met a tragic end when she was allegedly thrown off her third-floor balcony by her stalker and ex-boyfriend, Gareth Pursehouse. Found clinging to life, but later succumbing to her injuries, Amie's death has raised many questions, with answers to be revealed in court. Join us as we dive deep into the ongoing trial of Gareth Pursehouse, the man accused of this heinous act, and as we seek justice for Amie.
I'm feeling better. Not quite there, but I'm feeling much better. Well, thank you. Yesterday I read an admonishment by the court, and it read as follows: evidence of Amie Harwick's state of mind regarding her fear of the defendant Gareth Pursehouse has been admitted via Amie Harwick's email to herself and statements to friends for the limited purpose to show that she would not have consented to him entering her home and would not have consented to him lying in wait. You may consider that evidence only for that purpose and for no other. But no, you may consider that evidence, I neglected to state, with respect to her state of mind of being in fear. Okay? There you go. All right, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The people call Angelique G.
The first initial of the last name is G, is that correct?
Correct, Your Honor.
Okay. If you could raise your right hand, face my clerk, please.
Come here, please. This way. Oh, sorry. Do you solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give and the cause now pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Please state and spell your first name.
Angelique G. A-N-G-E-L-A.
Okay, first initial of your last name is G.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to lean right into the microphone so everybody
Yes.
can hear you. All right, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Morning.
Do you know someone by the name of Gareth Pursehouse?
Yes.
Do you see him in court today?
Yes.
Could you please identify him by telling us where he's seated and what he's wearing?
Over there, he's in a suit.
Could you describe the color and shirt?
Looks blue and blue.
Blue and blue what? Blue shirt and...
Blue blazer, blue shirt.
Okay, identify the defendant.
When did you first meet the defendant?
About 2 or 3 weeks before Valentine's Day, 2020.
And how did you meet him?
On Tinder.
And for people that don't know, what is Tinder?
It's a dating app.
And you met each other on the actual application?
Yes.
Did you communicate with each other using the Tinder app itself?
For a brief period of time.
Soon thereafter, did you continue your communication via cell phone?
Yes.
In order to do that, do you actually have to exchange phone numbers with the person?
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
And did you actually exchange phone numbers with the defendant?
Yes.
Did you store him in your cell phone number under his name and phone number?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, when you started to communicate outside of the Tinder application, did you exchange text messages?
Yes.
Did you exchange phone calls?
Yes.
How often would you say you communicated in the 2 weeks prior to Valentine's Day of 2020?
At least once a day.
Can you all hear? No. Okay, you're going to have to...
Sorry.
Speak a little louder if you can, please.
And that could move a little bit too if you wanted to.
No, scoot up. Is that better?
Yes. Yeah, that.
I'll ask again.
Okay.
Actually, I don't remember my question.
Can you read it back, Madam Reporter? Thank you.
Question: how often would you say you communicated in the 2 weeks prior to Valentine's Day of 2020? And your answer was at least once a day.
When you say once a day, would that be either by text message or phone call?
Sure.
Now, when did you finally see each other in person after first meeting on the application?
Maybe a couple days after meeting on the application.
In the 2 weeks leading up to Valentine's Day of 2020, how often had you seen each other in person?
2 to 4 times.
2 to 4 times?
Yeah.
Now, I know this is an embarrassing question, but I have to ask, were you intimate during any of those meetings that you had with the defendant those 2 to 4 times?
Yes.
Now, I want to turn your attention to Valentine's Day itself, February 14th of 2020. Did you guys actually communicate on that day?
Yes.
Was that via phone call or text message?
I think it was text.
At this time, Your Honor, the people are holding a series of text messages. It's one page. May that be marked as people's next in order?
68.
Showing you what's been marked as people 68. Do you recognize these series of text messages?
Yes.
Do you recognize these as the text messages you exchanged with the defendant?
Yes.
Now I'm turning your attention to a text message that's in green. Are those text messages that you sent or text messages that you received?
I sent those.
And the text messages that have a dark background, what appears to be a dark gray or black background, are those text messages that you received from the defendant?
Correct.
Now I'm pointing your attention to the text message in green where it says, "What are you up to and why haven't you asked me out tonight? Sad face." Is that a text message that you sent to the defendant on Valentine's Day?
Yes.
And did he respond to you shortly thereafter?
Yes.
Now what time was that?
Looks like about 7 p.m.
Can you see it better there?
6:48 p.m. it says.
And what was his response to you?
En route home, I told you I'm busy all week.
Now, did you expect to hang out with him that day?
I did.
And why did you expect to hang out with him on Valentine's Day?
We had been hanging out, and I enjoyed his company.
Now, did you find it kind of annoying that his response to you about Valentine's Day was that he'd be busy all week?
Yes.
Did he actually tell you what he was doing that day?
He said he was working on projects with some friends.
Did you find that to be a good excuse to not go out for Valentine's Day together?
Not particularly, but it is what it is.
Now, did you exchange text messages the next day, February 15th, 2020?
Yes.
Now, I'm showing you another series of text messages. When was your first communication the next day?
10:59 a.m.
And what was that communication?
He texted me, "Morning sunshine." I said, "Hi." He said, "What are you up to?"
Now, morning sunshine, was that the first communication you and the defendant had on February 15th?
Yes.
So he initiated that communication with you.
Correct.
Now, in response to the defendants asking you, "What are you up to?" there was a series of text messages here. Just got back from walking dogs. Think I'm going to ride my bike to the beach in a bit. It's gorgeous out. Oh, and getting quotes for a trip. Is that your response to the defendant?
Yes.
What do you mean when you say, "Oh, and getting quotes for a trip"?
I was looking into how much a trip would cost.
What kind of, like a trip?
Out of like a vacation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, to stay.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, and the reasons for those questions is a segue into this. Did you end up seeing the defendant that day?
Yes.
And how did you go about meeting up with the defendant on February 15th, 2020?
I rode my bike on the beach, and I stopped by his place.
And how did you go about getting a bike to ride over to the defendant's place?
I got a jump bike, which is an electronic bike that you can rent.
Now, when you talk about a jump bike, is that one of those ride share bikes that you see on the side of the road that you
Yes.
use your phone to ride?
Correct.
And when you do that, you utilize your cell phone. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you receive...
Counsel, we laid a foundation for something?
Yes,
Okay, I'll give you some leeway.
thank you. And do you receive a receipt as a result of that ride?
Yes, you do.
Your Honor, at this time, the people are holding a receipt of a trip. May that be marked as People 69?
Yes.
Showing you what's been marked as People's 69. Do you recognize what's photographed here?
Yes.
And how do you recognize that?
That's the route I took to get to his place. It's along the boardwalk.
So is this receipt reflect your trip from your house to the defendant's house?
Correct.
And he lives in what city?
Playa del Rey, I believe.
I'm going to zoom in here just a little bit. Where my fingers pointed indicates Saturday, February 15th, by 29768, 12:29 to 1:40 p.m. Did you arrive at the defendant's house at 1:40 p.m. as reflected in this receipt?
Objection, lady.
Go ahead. Sustain. Ask your next question.
Can you describe the time frame explain the time frame that's depicted in People's 69?
I arrived at his house at 1:40 p.m.
And what does 12:29 signify?
The time I left my house.
So it took you approximately 72 minutes to get from your house in, where was that?
Santa Monica.
To Playa del Rey?
Correct.
Now, what did you do once you arrived at the defendant's house at around 1:40 p.m.?
He greeted me. We went up to his place, and he was doing some work on the French doors at the front of his place, and I helped him organize his apartment.
How long would you say you were in his apartment for that evening, or that day?
Maybe 2 hours.
And what would you say his demeanor was when you initially saw him?
He greeted me, and after that he seemed sad and distant, I'd say.
Now,
I'm sorry, I could not hear.
You seem sad and
Distant.
distant.
Thank you.
were you intimate on this occasion when you went to the defendant's house?
No, ma'am.
Did you guys hug or kiss?
I think we hugged, but that's it.
You may have kissed, or were you unsure?
Maybe.
Was that something that you would have customarily done in the prior
Objection, Your Honor.
times?
Calls for speculation.
Sustain. Go ahead, counsel.
Now, you said you hung out in the defendant's house for about a couple of hours. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you guys decide to do anything else aside from just stay at his place?
No.
Was there any conversation about doing anything else aside from helping him organize his house?
At that point, no.
At what point did you guys discuss doing anything else aside from staying home?
Prior to my riding the bike along the boardwalk, we discussed what if we wanted to hang out today and what we would do.
And was this on a phone call?
Correct.
And what was the discussion in regards to what to do that day?
I think we threw out ideas. I don't recall exactly, but I think he suggested maybe going to the shooting range. I wanted to go to the beach because it was a beautiful day out and I wanted to be outside. He said he couldn't go in the sun because his skin was sensitive.
Overall.
Because I'm sorry, what?
He said his skin was sensitive, so he couldn't be outside. And I think he suggested going to the shooting range after that. And that's, I think, when I said, I'll just ride my bike up to you and teach you how to use the jump bike, because he'd never ridden one before.
Now, while you were hanging out with the defendant in his apartment, did you notice any injuries to him?
Yes.
And what kind of injury did you notice?
There was a bruise under his eye and maybe some scratches on his face.
Did you...
Sorry, I could not hear.
I didn't get that either.
Bruise under his eye and scratches on his face.
Okay.
On his face.
So just so that people can hear you, why don't you try to maybe keep your voice up just a tiny
Sure,
bit?
sure.
Thank you. You said you noticed a bruise and some scratches. Do you know which eye?
I think it was his right eye. He had
Is
a
that-
bruise.
I'm sorry, is that to the best of your recollection as you sit here today?
Correct.
Did you ask him about how he got this bruise and on his eye?
I did.
And what was his response?
I believe he said he cut himself shaving.
find that response to be odd?
Objection calls for a irrelevant response.
All right, sustained.
Did you believe him?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
So his response to you asking him about a bruise under his eye was that he cut himself shaving.
Objection asked and answered.
Well, overruled, because there were two injuries, types of injuries noted. One was scratches to his face, the other one was the eye bruise, so you can ask the question. Once you ask, we ask it again. Do it, please.
Go ahead and...
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
So his response to you asking about how he received a bruise on his eye was that he cut himself shaving.
Correct.
When you say there was a bruise on his eye, did it appear to be a black eye? What kind of bruise?
It looked like a small black eye, correct?
Had you seen a black eye on him prior to that day?
No.
Now, I know you said you hung out with him at his place for a couple of hours. At any point during the time you were with him, did he ever mention that he ran into an ex-girlfriend recently?
No.
Did he mention to you that he actually went to his ex-girlfriend's house on Valentine's Day?
No.
Did he appear distraught to you when he was hanging out with you?
Well, she said appear as opposed to wasn't distraught all along.
No.
In any of the times that you hung out, did he ever mention running into his ex-girlfriend?
No.
Did he indicate any thoughts to you on February 15th when you were hanging out at his house that he was very depressed?
No.
Did he indicate to you that he was at all suicidal while you were hanging out with him?
No.
Did he ever, in the time that he spent with you, express that he was suicidal?
No.
Thank you. No further questions. Sir.
Cross-examination.
Your Honor, I actually have a couple of other questions. May I reopen for just a moment?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry. Prior to testifying today, you had a conversation with me today. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you also have a conversation with defense prior to your testimony today?
Yes.
And when was that?
A few weeks ago.
And during your conversation with defense a few weeks ago, were you asked certain questions in regards to your interaction with the defendant on February 15th, 2020?
Yes.
What sort of question was asked of you in regards to what you guys did together on February 15th, 2020?
Objection irrelevant.
Sustained.
Now, in regards to your activities with the defendant on February 15th, 2020, you gave a statement to detectives. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you gave this statement to detectives around the time the defendant was arrested. Is that right?
Yes.
Were you with the defendant when he was actually arrested?
Yes.
Where were you guys going?
He was dropping me off at my house.
And during that conversation with detectives, you indicated to them what you did with the defendant while you guys were hanging out. Is that right?
Correct.
Was that same sort of question asked from you by the defense?
Yes.
Did the defense bring up with you that...
Object to this line of questioning, Your Honor.
Well, I haven't heard the question.
It is again going into what the defense asked.
Let me hear the question.
Was there any questioning that was initiated by the defense in regards to the defendant asking you to go to a shooting range?
All right. Sustained.
Withdrawn. Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right.
And that question is stricken the jury's to disregard
Yes.
that. Hello, Ms. G.
Hello.
Let me just get organized here for a second.
see if this stays up here. All right, so I wanted to start by asking you when the first time was that you met Gareth.
It was a few weeks prior to February 15th, 2020.
Do you remember the date?
No.
Okay. And when you met him, what did you guys do?
We went to a comedy club.
And was this for a friend's birthday?
Correct, yeah.
Do you remember who that friend was?
No.
Does the name Corey Soria sound familiar?
Sorry, no.
Okay. And that was at the, which comedy club was it?
The Comedy Store or the Laugh Factory? I can't recall
One
which
of those
one.
two?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you both arrive late and then leave early?
I don't recall arriving late or leaving early. but-
Okay. You just arrived whenever and
Yeah.
left whenever.
Yeah.
And do you know approximately the date you first started interacting with Gareth?
Again, a few weeks prior to February 15th.
Okay. So on February 15th, you got this text message, Morning Sunshine, and you decide to take your jump bike and ride to Gareth's apartment. Is that right?
Yes.
And how many times had you been to that apartment?
I think twice before.
Okay. Twice. So this was the third time?
Yeah, either the second or third time.
Okay.
Yep.
And when you arrived, did you find that the condition of his apartment kind of bothered you?
Yes.
And could you tell us why it bothered you?
It was just disorganized. I think he was doing construction work on his front patio doors, so all of his things were kind of like piled away from that area, and it was messy.
And so you found it very disorganized, and did you suggest that you help him organize everything?
Correct. Yeah.
I'd like to show you some pictures, if this will stay up. When you were at this apartment, do you remember what street it was on?
No.
Do you remember the neighborhood?
Yeah.
Was he in an apartment building, or was his unit attached to a standalone home?
It was attached to a standalone home. It was like the lower level, I think.
So it's kind of like what someone might call a granny flat, or a...
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So I have a series of photographs I'd like to mark. What's the next one in order?
You're the double S. So photograph 1 through what now?
I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 photographs.
All right.
So D 1 through 9. May I use this?
16, Your Honor. So it's defense D 1 through 16.
Double S 1 through 16.
I'm going to show you what's been marked defense SS1. Do you recognize this location?
Yes.
Is that the living room of Gareth's residence?
Yes.
Did you know this one? Which one? Showing you it's been marked as double S2. This is part of the living
Yes.
room.
Yes.
Was this the type of condition that you saw it in?
Correct.
This is the other side of that built-in cabinetry in the living room area.
Yes.
And is this the condition you saw it in?
Yes.
That was defense 4. No, 3. This is defense 4. Double S4. Is this the condition?
Yes. Yes.
All right, let's approach if you would. All right, counsel.
So the next one would be double S5.
All right.
And the one puts 6 photos, 6 additional photos.
6 additional photos and plus 16?
No. You said pick 6. So
Yeah, sure.
6.
Whatever you want. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Does this accurately reflect the state?
Yes.
And there seems to be construction materials. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is this the state of his bathroom?
Yes.
And this is 6. This is 6. This is the living room again,
Yes.
and that's an accurate representation.
Yes.
7. This is SS8. Is this accurate representation?
Yes.
SS9. Is this an accurate representation?
Yes.
And last one, SS10. You were in his garage when you went to get into the vehicle to be driven home.
Yes.
Is this an accurate representation of the garage?
I don't recall the garage.
Okay.
So Ms. Burstein-Lev, I'm just going to modify it. Double S is 1 through 10 as opposed to 1 through 16.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Yep. So it's 1 through 10.
Did you remember telling the detectives who interviewed you after the vehicle that you were in with Gareth was stopped? Do you recall telling the detectives that his place was disgusting?
Probably, yes.
Well, prior to testifying today, in addition to speaking with the prosecution, did you get to review the audio tape of your interview with detectives?
I read the transcript.
You read a transcript? And do you recall telling the detectives that Mr. Pursehouse, or Gareth, had told you that he'd had an excruciating breakup with an ex?
Objection, hearsay.
Interesting.
Well, this witness was asked on direct about this.
Objection, hearsay.
The question was whether or not he ever mentioned an individual or a prior relationship with this individual. You can ask that.
Well, but he had told you he had a bad breakup.
Objection, hearsay.
Okay. Did he ever mention that?
Yes.
Okay. I'll allow that. Go ahead.
So he told you he had this excruciating breakup.
Well, I'll allow the prior answer to stand, and let's move on.
Okay.
A bad breakup.
And had you tried to talk to Gareth and get to know him on a deeper level and find it was difficult for him to open up to you?
Somewhat, yeah.
And you said that when you saw him on the 15th, when you went to his place on the 15th, he didn't seem as he normally was. He seemed sad and distant.
Correct.
And how could you tell he was sad and distant?
We didn't chat much, and he was kind of staring off into space, doing something on electrical on the door.
And do you recall saying to me when we spoke that you felt sorry for him and you wanted to be there when he was sad, the same way he'd been there for you when you were sad?
Yes.
I'd like to talk to you about when you left Gareth's place. You had ridden a bike to his home, but you didn't want to have to ride it back. Is that correct?
I was going to ride it back. He offered to drive me home.
Okay.
I like riding bikes.
Okay.
It's not unusual.
Okay. So he offered to give you a ride and you accepted it
Correct.
because you had some friends that you were meeting up with later?
Correct.
And so you and Gareth walked out the back of his residence,
Yes.
and there's like a long flight of stairs that lead through the yard and lead to the detached garage.
Yes.
And his vehicle was in the detached garage,
Yes.
and it was a red Lexus.
Yes.
And so, did he open? If you recall, did he open up the garage door with him, or did you go into the garage and he went out front by himself?
I don't remember.
Okay. So then you both did get in the car,
Yes.
and he drove out of the garage.
Correct.
And as you both were driving out of the garage, what happened?
We were blocked in by several cars, and I wasn't really sure what was happening. I think they were normal-looking cars, and then I think a police car showed up at some point, and then they started telling him to get out of the car.
Did they tell both of you to get out of the car?
They asked him to get out first.
And how did they ask?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Did you see any guns drawn?
Objection, relevance.
I'll allow the answer. I think that one witness already testified that there were. Did you notice any guns drawn?
I don't recall, honestly.
All right.
Was it scary for you?
Very,
Relevance.
I'll allow the answer to stand.
Could you repeat your answer?
very.
Did Gareth say anything to try and reassure you?
Yes.
What did he say?
He said,
Objection, hearsay.
I'll allow it.
just do what they say.
And did you see Gareth get out of the car?
Yes.
And how was he able to get out of the car?
Through the passenger window or door or window, I can't remember, but and then he got face down on the ground.
And was that according to the instructions that were being yelled at him?
Yes. Yes.
And the instructions were yelled at him by officers?
Yes.
Yeah, it'll stand. All right.
I'm sorry, it'll
It'll
stand.
stand. Go ahead.
And then after Gareth got out of the car, did you have to get out of the car too?
Yes.
Were you instructed to also lay down on the ground?
Sustain.
Did you lay down on the ground?
Sustain.
Did you see Gareth taken away in handcuffs?
I don't remember. I saw him in the back of a car. I don't recall if it was in handcuffs.
This was a frightening experience for you?
Yes.
Sustain.
Well, Your Honor, she made a statement to detectives afterwards, and I think her state of mind is important.
I think, why is the state of mind important? We can talk about that sidewalk, but that's not. But she's already answered previously that it was a scary experience. I'll let that stand.
So you then went. How is it you came to talk to any detectives?
A police officer sat me down on the sidewalk. He wouldn't tell me what was happening. He said, "Wait for the detectives for your questions." And then a couple hours later, 2 detectives came and talked to me.
So you sat on the sidewalk for 2 hours?
I don't recall exactly how long, but it was a while, yes.
And then where were you while you spoke to the detectives?
I was in their car.
Was it still on that street where the arrest was conducted?
No, we drove, I think, to the impound to get my bag. That was in the car, in Gareth's car.
Okay, so the officers drove you to retrieve your personal property from the car that had been impounded.
Correct.
So you went to the tow yard to do that, and you were having a conversation on the way.
Correct.
Now, when you say you saw scratches on Gareth's face, where did you see the scratches?
I don't recall exactly. There were a couple on his neck and face, if I remember correctly.
Do you remember what side of his face they were on?
I want to say the right side of his face.
Do you remember how many you saw?
Maybe 3 or 4.
Can you describe the scratches? Were they scabbed? Were they welts? Were they red? Any way?
They were red.
They were red? Can you describe how long the scratches were?
Maybe a half inch.
And you don't know how many there were?
No.
Would you say it was more than 2?
Didn't she say 3 or 4?
3 to 4?
Was that your answer?
Yes, that's
Okay. And all on the right side, as far as you can recall.
Yes.
And so those 3 to 4 were all either on the face or on his neck?
Yes.
Do you recall what Gareth was wearing that day?
I think he was wearing orange basketball shorts, and then he changed.
What was he? Was he wearing a T-shirt?
Yes.
A short sleeve T-shirt?
Yes.
And basketball shorts.
Yes.
And that was while you guys were organizing the apartment?
Correct.
And then he changed before he drove you home?
I don't recall when he changed, but yes, that sounds right. At some point he changed from what I saw him in.
Okay. Did Gareth tell you whether or not he'd ever fired a gun before?
I think he said he'd never fired a gun before.
And do you have experience with firearms?
Yes.
And is that something you had told Gareth about?
Yes.
And had you ever suggested to Gareth that you guys go to a firing range?
Yes.
But on this particular day, Gareth suggested that.
I believe so.
Did that surprise you?
Not particularly.
Did he tell you why he wanted to go to the firing range?
I think it was in.
Sustained.
Did you ask him why he wanted to go to the firing range?
No.
Were you aware that Gareth's father had died recently?
Sustained.
Do you recall Gareth telling you he had a shoulder injury?
Sustained.
Did you ever notice there was a shoulder injury that Gareth had sustained prior to February 15th?
Sustained.
After Gareth, did you see Gareth taken into custody and driven away in a police vehicle?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'll let the answer stand. I believe she stated yes previously.
And so you still remained at that location after Gareth was taken away.
Yes.
Did you observe his demeanor during the arrest and transportation away from the location?
I'll allow the question to be asked. Did you observe his demeanor?
Yes.
Okay.
How would you describe it?
Calm.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Any regret?
Just really.
All right.
Ms. G, you were asked a series of questions about the defendant's place, and you had responded that he was working on the actual apartment. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did he tell you what he did for a living?
Yes.
Did he do construction?
Sustained.
Was he in construction?
No.
Objection, Your Honor, be on the stand.
Well, the first question you had asked about whether he was doing work is his home. That's different, and I'm going to sustain the objection the way this question is posed.
Did he tell you what he did for a living?
Yes.
And what was that?
So, sustained.
Admission by party opponent, Your Honor.
I'm sorry?
What he told her he did for a living? Admission by party opponent, Your Honor.
I understand. Let's approach it.
What he did for a living?
Yes.
And what did he say he did for a living?
Software development and apps.
And what?
For apps.
Okay.
Developed apps.
Now, you were asked a series of questions on cross-examination about this conversation you had with detectives. So just to be clear, you had a conversation with police officers sitting down on a curb as well as in a car on the way to pick up your personal belongings. Is that right?
Objection states the witness's testimony. She was told to wait for the detectives by the...
Well, again, no speaking objections. Is that correct? If you stated it that way, if it's not correct, I'm sure this witness will correct you. So,
Is that correct?
I'm sorry. What's
Sure.
that?
Did you have two separate conversations with law enforcement on that day?
Yes.
One was by the curb, is that correct?
Correct.
And one was in a car on the way to get your personal belongings.
Correct.
Now, your conversation with detectives was recorded, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, when you were speaking with detectives, did you ever bring up your conversation that you had with the defendant in regards to going to a shooting range that day?
I don't think so.
You were asked on cross-examination whether the defendant ever indicated to you whether he had fired a gun before. Do you recall those questions on cross-examination?
Yes.
Did that ever come up in your conversation with detectives?
I don't think so.
When did that ever come up?
Not at all until I spoke with the defense.
Did Mr. Pursehouse indicate to you that he was dating other women during the time that you were seeing each other in that few-week period prior to Valentine's Day?
Objection beyond the scope and irrelevant.
No. The field was done into cross-examination. There was a breakup with the prior relationships. I'll allow that.
But this is regarding currently.
Currently, did you say? No, at the time that they were
That's correct.
together, I guess. I'll allow it.
He did not say he was seeing anybody else.
Did you assume that he wasn't seeing anybody else during that time?
Yes.
Thank you, nothing further.
Okay. Anything?
Did the conversation about going to the firing range happen between you and Gareth?
Yes.
And you recall that?
Yes.
You didn't make that up to tell the defense?
No.
Thank you, nothing further.
Anything based on that one question? Nothing?
I'm sorry, and just defense brought that up with you, not you yourself. Is that correct?
They asked me about it, and yes, I confirmed.
Thank you. Nothing further.
All right, you may step down. Thank you. Let's call on the witness, if you would.
People call Dr. Neil Benowitz.
We'll take our break at 11, ladies and gentlemen. You can put it on that chair, sir, if you want. All right, if you're going to approach the witness, stand down here, please, sir. And before you have a seat, you can raise your right hand.
You solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give and the cause now pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Please state and spell both your first and last name.
Neil, Neal, and Benowitz, Benowitz.
All right.
Thank you. Please tell the jury what it is that you do for a living.
Well, I am a professor emeritus in medicine in the Division of Cardiology at San Francisco General Hospital. I'm an employee of the University of California, San Francisco. I practice medicine. I practice cardiology and medical toxicology.
You practice.
And I run a research laboratory.
You said you practice cardiology.
Yes.
And medical toxicology.
Correct.
And you also run a laboratory?
Yes, I've got a research laboratory that I've run for many years that's basically studied nicotine and tobacco.
When did you obtain your medical license? Approximately.
1971.
Do you have a license, a certified license as American Board of Internal Medicine?
Right, so that's a board certification. That means I've had training and then been qualified in internal medicine.
What's internal medicine?
That's sort of non-surgical medicine, so any medical illness that does not involve surgery. So heart disease, lung disease, kidney disease, any of those diseases are internal medicine.
And have you had that certification since about 1974?
Yes.
And are you certified under the American Board of Medical Toxicology?
Yes.
What does that mean?
So toxicology has to do with drugs or chemicals that cause injury. So like a drug overdose or a side effect of a drug or an industrial spill. Medical toxicology is a specialty of physicians who diagnose and treat people with medical toxicology problems.
And have you had that certification for that American board since about 1981?
Yes.
And do you also have a certification for the American Board of Clinical Pharmacology?
Yes, I do.
What does that mean?
Well, pharmacology is the science of how drugs work. Clinical pharmacology is a medical specialty where people do research on drugs, develop new drugs, study harmful effects of drugs. So toxicology is sort of a subset of clinical pharmacology.
In 2019, did you receive an award for the PLOS biology, that's PLOS biology, top 0.01% of scientists based on impact?
Yes, I did.
And what does that mean?
Well, that award is based, well, first, researchers publish papers on the research in medical journals. And then other researchers in the field may cite these in their own articles as sort of a background for their own papers. The citation index, so the 0.1%, is a measure of how many other researchers have cited your papers. And so my citations are in the top 0.1% of researchers.
Are you known as one of the world's experts on pharmacology and toxicology of nicotine?
Yes.
And why is that?
Well, most of my research field has been studying nicotine and tobacco. Actually, that started from my involvement in pharmacology and cardiology, because when I started doing research in the late 70s, early 80s, 40% of people smoked, and smoking was the primary preventable cause of premature heart disease. So that's why I started studying nicotine as a way to prevent heart disease.
What year was that approximately?
Late 1970s, early 1980s.
Okay.
More of the trial of the Hollywood sex therapist killer is on the way. Press subscribe now so you don't miss a moment of this riveting courtroom drama as we seek justice for Dr. Amie Harwick.